decided for our lunch break to take the car and head over to Otara for something to eat. After driving past several eating places, none of which were deemed suitable by my teen girl, she finally settled on McDonald's, and we pulled into a large and relatively deserted car park. We parked a few rows out from the building, but we couldn't see any problem in finding the car later because we were still the nearest car to the building, and we went in to eat. It was kind of a grey day, a lot like today, and we hoped we wouldn't get wet on the way back. We enjoyed our meal. I don't recall what we ate, but we eventually decided we should think about getting back so that we could find a park and be in our seats in time for the afternoon session. We were talking to each other as we walked out the door, pleased to see the rain was still holding off, and it took me a few seconds to realise that Emily had stopped walking, stopped talking, and she was staring open-mouthed at the car park. Once I realised she'd stopped, I turned to see what she was looking at, but I couldn't see anything unusual happening out there, so I looked back at her and I asked, "What's the matter?" "Mum," she began in a tone that clearly implied that I was completely stupid, "the car is gone." "Oh, what do you mean the car's gone? How could it possibly be gone? Look, it's just over..." Now, the word "there" refused to pass my lips until I could see the car and point it out to her, and so it remained unspoken. She did appear to be correct. The car was no longer where I recalled parking it before we went in. Well, Emily went into panic mode. In her mind, we were stranded in South Auckland, and not just any part of South Auckland, but conceivably one of the worst areas by reputation at that time. The car had been stolen, and we had no way of getting home. She was not a happy camper, not at all. While she was bewailing all this to me in tones not quite soft enough to prevent gathering attention, I was trying to work out where the car could be. Because in spite of the fact that we were in Otara, it was conceivable that it could have been stolen. My years of working in fire and general insurance told me that the make and model I had was almost at no risk of being stolen, on top of which, when you switched the engine off, the fuel gauge went down to E, so it wasn't even worth taking for a joyride. I was certain it had not been stolen, but it definitely wasn't where I remembered parking it. Maybe, I thought, I remembered parking it in a different place to where I really did park it. So I looked around all the different sections of the car park, trying to figure out which one I'd put it in, before my foolish memory tricked me into remembering another visit to that car park on another occasion. My eyes were not kind to me. My car was still nowhere to be seen. Emily was still beside me, becoming ever more agitated with our plight and quite distressed that I didn't seem to be taking the matter seriously at all. I tried explaining to her about the insurance statistics and the empty fuel gauge, but she was unconvinced and not at all inclined to be placated. I also told her that the sisters team had been praying protection over every single delegate attending the conference. They'd just spoken to us about it before we left the session before, and God was taking care of us, but she didn't have that depth of security in His love. Slowly, my mind began to figure out through all the distractions what could possibly have happened, and I looked across the car park, which sloped gently downhill, across 4 lanes of what was now reasonably heavy traffic, and to the small street in the distance across from the car park. I saw a car that looked a bit like mine, so I set off to check it out. Emily was still convinced it was stolen and thought I was insane going to look at a car just because it looked like mine. But it turned out that I was right. When we got to the car, people came out of the nearby shops to tell us how they'd seen it rolling by, and they'd run and put a couple of blocks under the wheels to stop it before it hit a building. Apparently I'd missed putting the brakes on when we got out of the car, but it was still quite firmly locked. Oh, ladies, am I the only one who can hear all of the men thinking, this is why you put a car in gear when you get out? To wind up my story, through the whole thing, I knew with absolute certainty that my car was safe somewhere, even though I couldn't see it and all the evidence pointed to something else. It was a long time before Emily could look back on this story with anything other than horror, and I wasn't even allowed to mention it for the next 3 years. But for me, I was ready to start laughing about this story before we even drove my unscratched car out of the small car park across the 4-lane main road over from the large car park where we initially started. Having that kind of unshakable confidence in God because of what Jesus did on the cross for us, to open the doors for that kind of trust relationship with the Father, something that I pray for you all.